Chapter 1, A Kiss from a Game. Manhattan, New York shimmered under 1,000 lights. A towering glass building in Midtown had been transformed into a stage for tonight's charity gala, where the elite gathered to showcase their generosity, or at least pretend to. Inside, crystal chandeliers reflected off marble floors, the clink of wine glasses mingling with polite laughter. Cassie Monroe, 28, stood behind the temporary bar, hands swiftly mixing a martini. Her tight black uniform made her look sharp, but the tiny silver guitar pendant peeking from beneath her collar hinted at her true self. Cassie didn't belong here. She was a self-taught musician, scraping by on-side gigs to afford recording equipment. By day, she played acoustic guitar in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, writing rustic folk songs and uploading videos to YouTube. A few thousand followers tuned in, but the dream of performing on a big stage still felt far away. Tonight, all she wanted was to finish her shift, collect her tips, and go home to her guitar. "Cassie, hurry up! That real estate mogul's waiting for his third drink," whispered Lena, a fellow bartender, nodding toward an impatient middle-aged man. Cassie smiled and slid the martini across the counter. She was used to the fast pace of events like this, polite smiles avoiding the curious gazes of the guests. But tonight, something felt off. Maybe it was the sip of wine she'd had during break, or maybe it was the glint in Lena's eyes, like she was about to stir up trouble. As the crowd thinned, Lena pulled Cassie and two other co-workers, Miguel and Tara, into a shadowed corner behind the bar. "We need a little fun," Lena declared, raising a bottle of Prosecco she'd borrowed from storage. "Let's play Truth or Dare. Whoever refuses drinks the whole glass." Cassie rolled her eyes but couldn't resist Lena's mischievous grin. She took another sip of Prosecco, warmth spreading through her. "All right, but keep it tame," she said. The first round flew by. Miguel picked Truth and admitted to faking sick to skip work. Tara picked Dare and danced a ridiculous jig on the floor. When it was Cassie's turn, Lena arched an eyebrow. "Truth or Dare, girl?" Cassie hesitated. She didn't like talking about herself, the past, the unfinished songs, or the dreams she kept buried. "Dare," she said, voice trembling slightly from the alcohol. Lena grinned wickedly. "Kiss a stranger in the room. Anyone you want, but it has to be the most unapproachable one." Miguel whistled. Tara covered her mouth, giggling. Cassie blushed, her heart thudding. "You guys are insane," she muttered, but Lena's stare told her there was no backing out. She stood, wiped her hands on her apron, and scanned the room. Tuxedos and ball gowns floated past, but one figure drew her attention. He stood alone near the window, back straight, eyes distant, dark brown hair, a perfectly tailored black suit, and a face so cold it seemed nothing in this world could touch him. "Him," Cassie whispered, pointing. Lena squinted. "Oh, Cassie, that's Julian Hayes, tech CEO, ultra rich, ultra private. Kiss him? Good luck." Cassie swallowed hard, but the Prosecco and peer pressure pushed her forward. The crowd blurred, her heartbeat roared in her ears. Julian Hayes stood silently, holding a glass of whiskey, eyes fixed on the city beyond. He was taller than she'd imagined, broad-shouldered, but there was something lonely in the way he stood. Cassie stopped a step away. "Excuse me," she said, voice shaky. Julian turned. His deep blue eyes met hers, unreadable. She didn't think, she just moved. Rising on her toes, she placed a hand on his shoulder and kissed him. His lips were cool, laced with whiskey, yet unexpectedly soft. The kiss lasted only 3 seconds, but it scrambled her breath. She pulled away, face flushed, her shirt shifted just enough for the guitar pendant to show. Julian looked stunned, his gaze flickering as though he'd just been pulled from a dream. "What just happened?" he asked, voice low and calm, but his eyes locked on her. Cassie mumbled, "Just a game. I'm sorry." She turned before he could say anything else and bolted back to the bar, her heart ready to explode. Lena and the others clapped and snickered, but Cassie wished she could vanish. "You're insane, Cassie," Miguel laughed. She shook her head, trying to focus on wiping glasses, but the feel of his lips still haunted her. In the corner of the room, Julian still stood, his finger lightly touching his mouth. He wasn't used to being surprised. As the CEO of Hayes Innovations, he'd built walls around himself long ago, after his fiancée's betrayal. But that girl, with the guitar necklace and nervous eyes, had shaken something loose. He watched her through the crowd, saw her quietly mixing drinks, softly humming a tune. That melody, raw and honest, threaded its way into his mind. Cassie's shift ended at midnight. She pocketed her tips, just enough to buy a new set of guitar strings, and stepped into the cold street. New York air turned her breath into pale mist. Pulling her coat tighter, she thought about the kiss. Idiot, she scolded herself. Julian Hayes was someone she'd never see again. He belonged to a world of chandeliers and tuxedos. She had her guitar, and dreams still out of reach. She took the subway back to Brooklyn. Her tiny apartment greeted her with the smell of old wood and warm yellow lights. Her acoustic guitar lay on the bed, the only friend who truly understood her. Cassie sat down, strummed a few chords, and softly sang a line from a song she was writing. Lost in the city, chasing a spark. The melody rose, soothing her heart. She didn't know that, in a high-rise penthouse across the city, Julian Hayes was searching for a name on YouTube, Cassie Monroe. A video appeared, her singing in a cafe, voice clear, eyes burning with passion. He clicked play, and for the first time in years felt his heart stir. You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Chapter 2. A Chance Encounter. Julian Hayes wasn't used to being haunted. As the CEO of Hayes Innovations, he ran his life the way he ran his company. Everything planned, no room for surprises. But since that night at the charity gala, the image of the girl with the guitar necklace and that unexpected kiss lingered in his mind. Cassie Monroe. He'd found her on YouTube with just a few clicks. Her channel had thousands of followers, enough for a presence but not fame. Her videos, singing in coffee shops, strumming an acoustic guitar in a tiny apartment, carried a raw honesty he couldn't look away from. Her voice, warm and unpolished, pulled him out of the cold, controlled days he was used to. Today, Julian sat in his office on the 50th floor, gazing out over Manhattan. On his computer screen was one of Cassie's videos, a song called City Sparks. The lyrics were simple but hit him deep. Chasing lights but losing heart. He turned off the video, telling himself he didn't have time for such nonsense. But her lips, the look in her eyes as she walked away, kept flashing back. He had to see her again. Not to pursue her. Julian didn't believe in love anymore after his fiancé's betrayal, but to understand why she had shaken him so deeply. The Rusty Anchor, a bar in the Lower East Side, buzzed on Friday night. Cassie stood behind the bar mixing a mojito, neon lights casting a glow on her high-tied brown hair. She wore a black t-shirt, her silver guitar pendant peeking out at the collar. The shift was busy, but she liked the rhythm. It helped her forget the stupid kiss from last week. Julian Hayes. She still blushed thinking about it, wondering what had possessed her. Thankfully, he belonged to a completely different world, and she would never see him again. On her break, Cassie sat in a corner of the bar with the small guitar she always brought along. She liked to sing a song to relax, and tonight she picked one of her own, Under the Noise. Her voice rose, gentle yet full of emotion, telling a story of dreams buried beneath the hum of city life. The crowd gradually quieted. A few turned to listen. Cassie didn't notice. She was singing for herself as always. Julian walked in at that very moment. He wore a navy shirt, no suit, trying to blend into the casual atmosphere of the Rusty Anchor. But his sharp eyes drew a few curious looks. He took a seat in a shadowed corner, ordered a whiskey, and listened. Cassie's voice drifted through the noise, touching him like a breeze. As she sang the final line, "Find me where the silence grows." His heart stirred with a feeling he hadn't known in years. When she finished, a few guests clapped. She smiled, tucked her guitar away, and returned to the bar. Then she saw him. Julian Hayes sitting there, his eyes locked on her. Her heart slammed. What is he doing here, she wondered, forcing herself to stay calm. Another whiskey, she asked, her tone a bit sharp. Julian gave a faint smile, the corner of his mouth lifting. No, thank you. That was a beautiful song. Did you write it yourself? Cassie froze. She hadn't expected him to notice, let alone recognize her. "Yeah, just messing around," she said, wiping the counter to hide her nerves. Julian tilted his head. "Didn't sound like messing around. That melody, it made me forget everything for a moment." His words were sincere, but Cassie was wary. Rich men often spoke sweetly. She knew better. "Thanks," she said curtly, turning away to serve another guest. A few days later, Cassie sat in her favorite coffee shop in Williamsburg, a notebook open in front of her. She was jotting down lyrics, caught in a moment, scared to stay. She didn't know who the song was about, but Julian's image kept flickering in her thoughts. She shook her head, telling herself it was just leftover noise from that silly kiss. Julian appeared, as if summoned from her mind. He wore a knit coat, looking more approachable than last time, but still unmistakably him. "Another coincidence," he said, sliding into the seat across from her with a polite nod. Cassie raised an eyebrow. "Is it really?" Julian smiled, not denying it. "I saw you writing something." "Lyrics?" he asked, nodding toward the notebook, curiosity in his eyes. Cassie snapped the notebook shut, slightly annoyed. "Are you following me, Mr. CEO?" Julian raised his hands in mock surrender. "Not following. I just like your music. It's real." Cassie studied him, searching for the usual fake charm, but saw only rare sincerity. They started talking, awkwardly at first, then more naturally. Julian told her he used to play piano in college, but gave it up for work. Cassie admitted she wrote songs to forget bad days. "Music's like a friend that never leaves," she said, and immediately blushed, realizing how vulnerable that sounded. The next day, a package arrived at the Rusty Anchor, addressed to Cassie. Inside was a high-quality condenser microphone, the kind she could only dream of affording. No name, just a note. "For your voice to shine." Cassie frowned, instantly suspecting Julian. Did he think she needed charity? But she couldn't deny it. The mic would seriously improve her recording quality. That night, Julian showed up at the bar, almost like he knew she'd confront him. "You sent the mic, didn't you?" Cassie said, voice a mix of gratitude and challenge. Julian nodded. "I didn't mean to offend. I just think you deserve the best." Cassie sighed, but something in his eyes, gentle, almost lonely, softened her. "Thank you," she said, "but don't think I owe you anything." They talked longer, about music, New York, small things. Cassie realized Julian wasn't like the wealthy men she'd met before. He didn't boast, he didn't control. He listened, really listened, as if her voice was the only thing that mattered. As the bar neared closing, Julian set down his glass. "I'm starting a scholarship fund for underprivileged students," he said. "I want you to be an advisor, to help design the program, and maybe teach music to the kids." Cassie blinked, surprised. "Why me?" Julian looked straight at her. "Because you know how to inspire. I see that in your music." Cassie didn't answer right away. She needed time. Julian stood, leaving behind a business card. "Think about it, Cassie." He walked away, but his gaze lingered, like a melody she couldn't forget. She held the card, her fingers brushing the guitar pendant. For the first time, she wondered if fate was daring her to play a new game. Manhattan in the afternoon buzzed like a never-ending symphony. Car horns, footsteps, and voices all blending on the streets below. Inside the sleek offices of Hayes Innovations, Cassie Monroe sat at a conference table, a stack of documents about the scholarship fund in front of her. She still wasn't used to this world, the glass walls, oversized screens, and the professional chill that hung in the air. But this part-time advisory job was an opportunity to stabilize her finances, and more importantly, to teach music to underprivileged students. Cassie, 28, her signature silver guitar pendant peeking from under her blouse, felt like she had stepped into a world that didn't quite belong to her. And the one who had brought her into it, Julian Hayes, was sitting across from her, those deep blue eyes more intense than she would have liked. Julian, 34, was no longer the cold CEO she'd kissed at the charity gala. He was still polished in a gray shirt, but something gentler surfaced when he spoke about the scholarship fund. "We need a music program that actually inspires," he said, sliding a document across the table. What do you think about teaching guitar and songwriting to the kids? Cassie nodded, flipping through the papers, though her mind wandered. She still didn't understand why Julian had chosen her, a bartender, an unknown musician on YouTube. For this, the meeting ended, but Julian asked her to stay a little longer to discuss further. The office slowly emptied, golden light from the sunset spilling through the windows. Cassie placed the small guitar she always carried onto the table, like a silent shield. "I've reviewed the plan," she said in a steady tone. "The kids need something practical, like learning how to turn their feelings into lyrics." Julian smiled slightly. "Like you do?" Cassie blushed. She hadn't expected him to be so familiar with her music. "I just write so I don't go crazy in this city," she said, half joking. Julian stood and walked to the window, gazing down at the streets. "You know, I used to play piano," he said, his voice low. "But I gave it up. Life didn't leave room for it." Cassie tilted her head, curious. "So why do you care about music now?" Julian turned back to her, a shadow in his eyes. "Because it reminds me that I used to feel things." The mood shifted, more intimate. Cassie began strumming a few chords on her guitar, a nervous habit. Julian sat down closer to her, not too close, but near enough for her to feel his presence. "How did you write your first song?" he asked. Cassie paused, her fingers brushing the guitar pendant. She wasn't used to opening up, but his eyes, sincere and non-judgmental, made it easier. "I was 20, she began quietly. "I dated this guy. Thought it was love. He said he'd help me record professionally, but he just wanted money. Took everything I saved for equipment, then left." She gave a bitter laugh. "I wrote my first song the night he disappeared. It was awful, but it kept me from falling apart." Julian listened without interrupting. He saw himself in her story. Betrayals, scars no one else could see. "And you?" Cassie asked, genuinely curious. "A guy like you probably has people around all the time. Why are you alone?" Julian looked at her, surprised by the bluntness. He sighed, and for the first time, his mask slipped. 5 years ago, I was engaged. Her name was Elise. I thought she loved me, but she only wanted a tech project I was building. She sold it to my competitor and walked away. It was worth millions, but losing it didn't hurt as much as losing trust." Cassie was silent, hearing the pain in his voice. She strummed a gentle chord, trying to soften the air between them. "I don't really know what to say," she admitted, "but I think you deserve better." Julian smiled, his first real smile. "So do you, Cassie." They kept talking about the streets of New York, how Cassie found melodies in car horns and falling rain. Julian shared how he used to love jazz, but now only listened to music to escape pressure. Cassie teased, "Jazz? I thought you were more of a dry symphony kind of guy." Julian laughed, his eyes sparkling. "You make me want to listen to your music more." To break the tension, Cassie picked up her guitar. "Okay, but don't laugh," she warned, then strummed a slow melody. She sang Streetlight Lullaby, a song she'd written about wandering Brooklyn at night, searching for light in the dark. Her voice was clear and honest, the lyrics telling their own story. Under streetlights were just strangers, holding secrets, chasing dangers. Julian sat motionless, feeling something inside him stir with every note. By the time she sang the final line, he felt a part of himself fill that had long been empty. Cassie stopped, cheeks flushed. "It's not finished," she said, tucking her hair behind her ear. Julian looked at her, his voice husky. "It's perfect." He pulled out his phone, opened a recording app. "Sing it again. I want to keep it." Cassie laughed, shaking her head. "Are you nuts? I don't sing on command." But she still played a few chords again, letting him record a short clip. The sound of her guitar filled the office, like a secret only the two of them shared. As the sun finally set, Cassie packed up. Julian walked her to the elevator, the air between them lighter than ever. "Do you think music can heal?" he asked suddenly. Cassie looked at him, her eyes soft. "It saved me. Maybe it can save you too." Julian nodded, saying nothing more, but his eyes said everything. Cassie stepped outside, New York's night air wrapping around her. She thought about Julian, not the wealthy CEO, but the man with scars like hers. Back in his office, Julian replayed the recording. Cassie's voice rang out, raw and real. Under streetlights, we're just strangers. He saved the file to his phone, a rare smile tugging at his lips. For the first time in years, he felt like he could trust someone. And her voice, he knew he wanted to hear it forever. Chapter 3. A misunderstanding that shattered trust. The Plaza Hotel glittered like a palace, crystal chandeliers casting light over ball gowns and tuxedos at tonight's charity gala. Cassie Monroe stood near the bar, wearing a borrowed black dress from Lena, feeling like a stray note in a symphony of luxury. Julian Hayes had invited her as a consultant for the scholarship fund, but the way he'd looked at her over the past few weeks, gentle, attentive, told a deeper story. She had begun to believe that maybe, just maybe, he saw her as more than an unknown musician. But tonight her heart was uneasy, like she sensed a storm was coming. Julian's scholarship fund was the centerpiece of the event. On the giant screen, a video played showcasing the students the fund had helped, backed by Streetlight Lullaby, the song Cassie had written. Her voice echoed through the ballroom, raw and emotional, silencing the crowd. Julian stood on stage speaking about the fund's mission, but his eyes scanned the audience for her. Cassie smiled, fingers clutching the strap of her bag where her lyric notebook rested. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, but for Julian, she had said yes. After his speech, Cassie was invited on stage to answer questions about the music program. She stepped into the bright lights, heart pounding. A reporter with a sharp smile raised her mic. "Ms. Monroe, your song in the video is deeply moving, but I've heard it bears a strong resemblance to a track by Lila Gray. Did you borrow inspiration from her?" Cassie froze as if punched in the gut. Streetlight Lullaby was her soul, born from nights wandering Brooklyn. "No," she answered, voice trembling. "I wrote that song myself. I don't know Layla Gray." The crowd murmured. The reporter pressed on, sweet voice laced with venom. "Really? Then what about the rumor that you once dated Martin Kessler, Mr. Hayes' biggest competitor? Did he get you this opportunity?" The room went still. Cassie felt the blood drain from her face. Martin Kessler. 4 years ago, when she was just a 24-year-old hopeful musician, Martin had approached her, claiming to be a music producer. He promised to get her into a studio, but only used her to network with artists and sponsors, then disappeared once she was no longer useful. She hadn't known he was a tech businessman or that he had any connection to Julian. She looked at Julian, standing near the stage. His face had darkened. The old pain, Elise's betrayal, selling his $1 million project to Kessler, clearly written in his expression. "I didn't know who Martin was back then," Cassie said, her voice cracking. "He was just some guy in the music scene. I have no ties to him." But her words were fragile, drowning beneath the crowd's skeptical whispers. The reporter smiled, moving on to another question, leaving Cassie shattered on stage. She stepped down, legs shaky, and found Julian in a corner of the ballroom. He stood alone, fingers clenched around a whiskey glass. "Julian," she said, pleading, "I didn't know Martin was your rival. He lied to me, used me. And the song, it's mine." Julian looked at her, his eyes colder than she had ever seen. "You were his," he said, voice low. "And now you're here, in my project. And I'm supposed to believe that's coincidence?" Cassie blinked, tears spilling. "You think I'm like him? After everything I've shared with you?" Julian stepped back, his expression caught between pain and doubt. "Elise said she was innocent too," he muttered. "She took everything I built and gave it to Kessler. I don't know who to trust anymore, Cassie." His words cut like blades. Cassie backed away, her voice breaking. "If you want someone without a past, without mistakes, then I'm not her." She turned and ran, fleeing the ballroom, leaving behind the lights and laughter. Outside the plaza, the New York night was bitterly cold. Cassie hugged herself, trying to hold back the sobs. She had opened her heart to Julian, sung for him, and he met her with suspicion. Her song, the thing she cherished most, was now being called a stolen work. She called a cab and returned to her small apartment in Brooklyn. In the dark, she sat by the window, watching the city lights. But she didn't touch her guitar. Tonight, music couldn't soothe her. Back inside the ballroom, Julian stood alone, whiskey glass empty. Cassie's voice still played on the screen. Under streetlights, we're just strangers. He remembered her singing that in his office. How sincere her eyes had been. But Martin Kessler's name loomed like a ghost, dragging the pain of Elise back to life. He wanted to believe Cassie, but the fear of betrayal was louder. He pulled out his phone and replayed Streetlight Lullaby. Her voice made his heart ache. He had been wrong to say what he did, but he didn't know how to fix it. Julian left the gala without a word. In the back of his car, he listened to her song, Eyes Distant. He wanted to find her, to apologize, but fear held him back. In Brooklyn, Cassie held her notebook and wrote one line. Trust is a song I forgot how to sing. Tears fell as she closed it. Two hearts in the same city, now separated by a melody no one was singing. Early autumn in Pennsylvania was gentler than New York. Tree-lined roads blanketed with golden leaves and the air crisp and clean. Cassie Monroe stood before a small classroom in a community center in a struggling town, her acoustic guitar in hand, guiding a group of kids through basic chords. She had left New York 3 weeks ago, taking a volunteer teaching position through a nonprofit she had contacted long ago. She needed space, not just from the city, but from Julian Hayes and the crushing doubts he had voiced at the charity gala. But even here, among children's laughter, her heart remained heavy, like a song still missing its chorus. Cassie rented a small room in a local boarding house, just big enough for her guitar and lyric notebook. She tried to find her spark again, but every chord reminded her of Julian's eyes, tender in the office, cold at the gala. He'd called her a user, questioned even Streetlight Lullaby, a song born from her own broken pieces. She told herself she was strong, but the pain crept in like autumn wind through old windows. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Julian threw himself into work like a machine. Meetings, contracts, strategies for Hayes Innovations filled his days. But at night, he couldn't escape Cassie. He'd rewatch her cafe performance on YouTube, her voice whispering, "Under streetlights, we're just strangers." Each note felt like a quiet accusation. He had let fear cloud his trust. Martin Kessler, who'd once manipulated both Elise and Cassie, wasn't worth losing her. Julian opened his laptop and typed an email. Cassie, I'm sorry. I never should have doubted you. Your song, your voice, they're real. I want to make things right. He typed, deleted, typed again, but he didn't send it. Pride and fear of rejection held him back. Instead, he watched a new video Cassie had uploaded days ago, a song called Broken Chords. Its lyrics dripped with pain. You took my song, left me in silence. Trust was a note I couldn't find. Julian listened, heart clenched. She had written it because of him, because of what he said. He closed the laptop, knowing he had to do something, but he didn't know where to start. In Pennsylvania, Cassie was teaching the kids how to write lyrics, encouraging them to tell their own stories through music. She smiled as one shy boy strummed his first chord, but her eyes drifted. She carried her guitar through town, playing in the park, at small cafes, trying to find herself again. One night she sat by the Susquehanna River, writing broken chords in her notebook. The lyrics poured out like tears. I sang for you, but you didn't hear. She uploaded the video, not expecting anyone to watch, only needing release. The next day, an email arrived from Julian's Scholarship Foundation. Subject, Invitation to the Tech and Arts Conference. Cassie opened it, her heart thudding. It was an invitation to perform at a major conference in New York, where Julian would be the keynote speaker. At the bottom was a handwritten message. I want you to sing at the event. Your voice deserves to be heard. Cassie frowned and tossed her phone onto the bed. Was this pity? Guilt? She didn't respond. She decided to stay in Pennsylvania. She didn't need Julian's stage or his gaze. But every night after the kids went home, Cassie sat alone and played her guitar. She tried writing something new, but the melodies always circled back to Julian. His rare smile, the way he had once listened to her, like her voice was the only sound in the world. She shook her head, telling herself she didn't need him. But when a student asked, Miss Cassie, have you ever sung for someone you loved? She went silent, eyes stinging. She had sung for Julian, and he had walked away. Back in New York, Julian couldn't stop thinking about her. He visited the Rusty Anchor, hoping to see her, but found only Lena, who raised an eyebrow when she saw him. "She's gone, Mr. CEO," Lena said, her voice biting. "She's worth more than you thought." Julian nodded, leaving the bar hollow. He stopped by the cafe in Williamsburg, where he had once watched Cassie write lyrics. Her notebook was gone, but he pictured her sitting there, fingers drifting across the page. One night, he called her. The phone rang, but he hung up before she could answer. He didn't know what to say. He watched broken chords again, her lyrics slicing into him. "You broke the chords I played for you." He realized how deeply he had hurt her, and that he was the reason. He drafted another email. "Cassie, I was wrong. Please let me fix this." But once again, he didn't send it. He feared she wouldn't forgive him, feared she no longer needed him. In Pennsylvania, Cassie received a message from Lena. "The CEO showed up. He looked wrecked. He asked about you." Cassie read it, heart tightening, but she didn't reply. She focused on the kids, teaching them a cheerful song about fall. But when one little girl hit the wrong note, giggled and said, "I'm sorry, Miss Cassie." Cassie thought of Julian. He had never apologized aloud. But that look in his eyes at the gala, pain, confusion, said he never meant to hurt her. She opened his email again, rereading the handwritten note, "Your voice deserves to be heard." She wanted to delete it, but her finger paused. Instead, she closed the laptop, picked up her guitar, and played a new melody, one without words. It was sad, but somewhere in it was hope, like moonlight over the Susquehanna. She didn't know if she could forgive him, but she knew she hadn't forgotten. In his penthouse, Julian stared out over Manhattan. He played Streetlight Lullaby on his phone. Cassie's voice filled the silence. Tender, true. He made a decision. If he ever saw her again, he would apologize, no matter what it took. But where was that chance now when she was hundreds of miles away and their hearts were divided? By melodies no one dared to sing together. He turned off the lights, letting her voice echo in the darkness, hoping one day they'd find their way back. Still with us? If you're hearing this outside Soul Stories, come back to where the story truly began, with heart and honesty. Chapter 4. When Fate Comes Knocking. A bitter October night cloaked New York in shadows, the lights of skyscrapers flickering like candles in the dark. Inside the Javits Convention Center, hundreds gathered for a major tech conference where Julian Hayes, CEO of Hayes Innovations, stood on stage. A spotlight illuminated his Navy suit as he spoke with calm authority about the future of technology and the mission of his scholarship fund. But his mind wasn't on the crowd. It was on Cassie Monroe, the woman whose voice had once awakened his heart. He had sent her an email, inviting her to perform tonight, hoping she'd come. But her silence lingered. He wondered if fate would bring them back together, or if he'd destroyed everything with his mistrust. His keynote ended with polite applause. Julian bowed, his gaze distant, and exited toward the parking lot, where his driver, Mike, waited by the black Bentley. "Long night, sir," Mike said, opening the door. Julian slid into the back seat, pulled out his phone, and saw a YouTube notification. Cassie had uploaded a new video. Broken chords. He tapped play. Her voice poured out, raw and aching. "You took my song, left me in silence." He closed his eyes, guilt rising like a tide. He had let his fear of betrayal eclipse his trust. He whispered, barely audible, "If there's a God, please give me a chance to make this right." The car moved down the avenue, city lights blurring past. Suddenly, a sharp screech. "Hold on, Mr. Hayes," Mike shouted. Julian looked up. Headlights blazed straight into them. The car swerved, then slammed into a median. The crunch of metal tore through the night. Julian was thrown against the door, glass shattering, blood trailing from his temple. Darkness swallowed him, and just before consciousness slipped away, he thought he heard her voice, soft, haunting. Under streetlights were just strangers. In a small Pennsylvania town, Cassie sat in her dimly lit rented room, her guitar resting quietly on the bed. She had just finished another music class for underprivileged kids, trying to find joy in their laughter. But her heart remained tangled in pain, haunted by the gala and Julian's words. Your voice deserves to be heard. She tried to forget him, but every note she played led back to him. His gaze when she sang, the hurt in his accusations. She turned on the TV to shake the thoughts away, but a breaking news alert interrupted. Tech billionaire Julian Hayes in critical condition following car crash after major conference in New York. Foul play suspected. Images of the crushed Bentley flashed across the screen, police tape flapping in the wind. The anchor reported Julian was in the ICU, his condition grave. Cassie froze, the glass of water in her hand shattering on the floor. His smile, his wounded eyes, all of it crashed into her like a wave. She couldn't breathe. It was as if her own heart had stopped too. She dropped to her knees, clutching the small wooden cross hanging on the wall. Her grandmother's gift, long untouched. "Please, God," she whispered through tears, "don't let it end like this." Her faith had never been strong, but tonight it was the only light left. She thought of Streetlight Lullaby, the song she'd written for Julian, the one he'd once recorded. She had believed it was just a moment. Now she believed maybe, just maybe, she had been led to him, even if only to sing once. Cassie threw her guitar into the back seat of her aging Toyota Corolla. The Pennsylvania night was dark, but she drove, eyes blurred with tears. Highway lights streaked across her windshield. She whispered into the silence, "Please let me get there in time." She remembered what her grandmother used to say, "Faith is walking even when you can't see the path." She didn't know if she still loved Julian or if she was just terrified of losing him, but she had to be there. The radio flicked on automatically. She turned it off. She only wanted to hear the song inside her, holding secrets, chasing dangers. In New York, police combed through the wreckage. The Bentley's brake lines had been deliberately cut, an act of sabotage. A typed threat had arrived at Hayes Innovations that morning. Drop the project, or next time, no one survives. Investigators suspected Martin Kessler, the same man who had once manipulated both Elise and Cassie. Media outlets swarmed with headlines: tech mogul assassination attempt, rival sabotage, or scandal. But in the ICU at Mount Sinai Hospital, Julian lay unconscious, machines beeping in rhythm with his fragile heartbeat. Unaware of the storm outside, Cassie drove through the night 6 hours without stopping. At a gas station, she gripped the cross in her pocket, whispering, "Please keep him safe." As dawn broke, she reached New York. She parked outside the hospital, hair tangled, guitar slung across her back. Inside, a nurse guided her to the ICU. Only family was allowed in, but she was permitted to look through the glass. Julian lay still, head bandaged, face pale, an oxygen tube beneath his nose. Cassie froze, tears streaming silently. It felt like the world had collapsed. She sank onto a bench outside the room, her guitar beside her. A nurse passed by, gave her a kind look, but said nothing when Cassie began to hum softly. Streetlight Lullaby. Just above a whisper, "Under streetlights, we're just strangers." Her voice cracked, but she kept singing, like a prayer, a plea, a lifeline. She believed, even if just a little, that God might be listening, that fate hadn't finished their story yet. As her song ended, she bowed her head, whispering, "Julian, please don't go." She didn't know if he could hear her, didn't know if he would wake, but she was there, with trembling faith and a voice full of love, hoping it was enough to bring him back. Inside the ICU, Julian's heartbeat, though weak, persisted, and somewhere, in the deep shadows of unconsciousness, a distant melody stirred. Familiar, soft, like her voice, like light calling him home. Mount Sinai Hospital shimmered under the cold, sterile, white lights, the steady beeping of machines marking a rhythm that refused to cease. Inside the ICU room, Julian Hayes lay motionless, his head and chest wrapped in white bandages, an oxygen tube beneath his nose. The sharp, commanding features of the powerful CEO had softened into something pale and vulnerable. Cassie Monroe sat beside him, trembling hands resting on the acoustic guitar across her lap. She had been there since morning, after driving all night from Pennsylvania, fueled only by fragile hope and a desperate prayer that God would keep him alive. Her eyes stayed fixed on Julian as if the moment she looked away, he might vanish. Cassie hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten, save for a weak cup of coffee from the vending machine. The nurse had allowed her into the ICU for a few hours, with one rule: no noise. But she hadn't said anything about singing softly. Her hair was tangled, her eyes red from crying. She thought of those brief but unforgettable weeks, working with Julian, the way he had listened to Streetlight Lullaby in his office, how his eyes had softened like he was about to say something that never came. Then the gala, his doubt, his cruel words. She'd left New York believing she was strong enough to forget him. But now seeing him like this, broken and still, she knew she wasn't strong enough to lose him. She reached out, placing her hand gently on his. His skin was cold. "Julian," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I thought I was strong when I left New York, when I ignored your email. But I'm not. I'm weak. I can't lose you." Tears slipped down her cheeks, soaking into her worn coat. She bowed her head, murmuring a prayer. "Dear God, please give him another chance. If this is destiny, don't let it end like this." Her faith had always been a flicker, but now it was the only light guiding her through the dark. She picked up her guitar, her fingers brushing softly over the strings. And then she began to sing. Her voice was fragile, barely more than a breath. "Under streetlights, we're just strangers, holding secrets, chasing dangers." The melody drifted through the room like incense, sacred, trembling. She sang not for performance, not for praise, but as prayer. Each note was a lifeline, tying her to him. When she reached the final lines, her voice broke completely. "I love you, Julian. Whether you hear me or not, I love you." She lowered her head, tears soaking her sleeves. And then something. A faint squeeze. His fingers wrapped loosely around hers. Cassie froze, breath catching in her throat. She looked up. His eyes were still closed, but a single tear trailed from the corner of his eye. "Julian?" she whispered, voice shaking. He didn't respond, still hovering somewhere between unconsciousness and wakefulness. But the pressure of his fingers, subtle, deliberate, was enough. She clutched his hand, sobbing openly now, the moment a fragile miracle in her arms. God had heard her. Somehow, against all odds, he had heard. She refused to leave, even when the nurse gently reminded her visiting hours had ended. Cassie pulled out her notebook and began to write. Lyrics scribbled hastily, born from emotion and need. "In the quiet, I found you. Through the darkness, faith pulled through." There was no title yet, only a heartbeat and a promise. She kept glancing at Julian, half expecting him to open his eyes at any moment. She whispered, "You have to wake up, Julian. I still owe you a song." Outside the ICU, the world churned. News crews camped in the hospital lobby, headlines flashing across screens. Billionaire tech mogul survives assassination attempt. Brake lines cut, all eyes on rival Martin Kessler. Police confirmed the crash had been deliberate, and all signs pointed to Julian's longtime nemesis, Kessler, the same man who had once deceived both Elise and Cassie. But inside that hospital room, none of that mattered. Cassie didn't care about enemies, business, or the media. She only cared about the man in the bed. She reached into her pocket, fingers finding the small wooden cross her grandmother had left her. She clutched it tightly. "God brought me here," she thought. "Now please, keep him with me." She stayed at the hospital all day, only stepping away for a brief moment to call Lena. "I'm not going back to Pennsylvania right now," she said quietly. On the other end, Lena sighed. "You love him, don't you?" Cassie didn't respond. She just said, "Thank you." She returned to Julian's bedside and began to write again. She wrote about faith, about love, about things she once believed she wasn't worthy of. Each line on the page was a step closer to him, closer to healing what was broken. Near midnight, the doctor entered, glancing at Julian's chart. Cassie rose to her feet, heart racing. "Ms. Monroe," the doctor said in a calm voice, "he's past the critical phase. His vitals are stabilizing. He'll need rest, time, but he's going to recover. It may take weeks or longer." Cassie nodded, tears sliding down her face again, this time out of relief. Thank you, she whispered, eyes on Julian. He was still unconscious, but the slight squeeze of his hand, the single tear down his cheek, it had been enough. She knew he had heard her. Somewhere in that dreamlike void, he had reached for her. She sat back down, placing her notebook beside the bed. She didn't sing anymore. She just held his hand, feeling warmth slowly return to it. She leaned close, whispering, "I'll be here, Julian, no matter how long it takes." She looked toward the window where the lights of New York glittered like scattered notes of a song. And deep in her heart, stronger now than ever, was the belief that destiny had led them to each other, and that God would lead them through this night. Inside the ICU, Julian's heartbeat continued, steady and true. A quiet melody beginning again, promising one day they would sing it together. Chapter 5. A Fragile Reunion. Autumn sunlight filtered softly through the blinds of Mount Sinai Hospital, warming the recovery room where Julian Hayes lay. 4 days had passed since the accident. Though he was no longer in the ICU, his body remained weak, a fresh scar peeking from beneath the bandage on his forehead. Cassie Monroe sat by his bedside, hands clasped tightly, her expression tender but anxious. She had been there from the moment he was admitted, leaving only briefly to shower and call Lena. Her faith, both in God and in the fate that had led her back to Julian, was the flame that kept her steady, even as her heart fluttered every time she looked at him. Julian opened his eyes, the blue of them dim by medication, but brightening when they met hers. "You're here," he rasped. Cassie blinked back tears and smiled. "I'm not going anywhere." Her voice trembled as she told him about the overnight drive from Pennsylvania, about the moment she saw him still and unconscious in the ICU. "I sang to you," she said softly. "Streetlight lullaby. I prayed God would let you hear me, let you stay." Julian listened, a dull ache rising in his chest, but it was softened by warmth. He remembered her voice, distant like light in a long tunnel, pulling him back from the dark. "You stayed the whole time," he murmured, as if needing confirmation. Cassie nodded, fingers brushing the small wooden cross in her pocket. "I couldn't leave you alone." He reached for her hand. The motion made him wince, but he managed it. "Cassie," he said, his voice raw, "you're here when I have nothing. No power, no reputation. You're my family." His words fell like a prayer, bare and honest. Cassie bowed her head, tears spilling down her cheeks, though her smile bloomed through them. "I wrote that song in the ICU, for you," she admitted. "I didn't realize how much I loved you, until I almost lost you." Julian squeezed her hand gently. His eyes said what his voice couldn't. "I heard you. Your voice was my light." The door opened, breaking the moment. Emma Hayes stepped inside, her blonde hair tied back, her gray suit perfectly pressed. At 38, she was a respected attorney in Boston, always composed, but her eyes now brimmed with concern. "Julian," she said, her tone firm but shaky, "you scared me to death." She leaned down to hug him gently, careful not to jostle his injuries. Julian offered a faint smile. "You got here fast, Emma." Her gaze shifted to Cassie, curious but kind. "And you are—" Julian introduced her without hesitation. "Cassie Monroe. She saved me." Emma gave Cassie a nod of quiet appraisal, then softened. "Thank you," she said. "Rachel told me you've been here since the beginning." Rachel Nguyen, Julian's assistant, entered just behind Emma, holding an iPad and a bouquet of yellow daisies. At 30, she was efficient, loyal, and rarely frazzled. Today, she looked visibly relieved. "Boss," she said with a teasing smile, "don't scare me like that again." She placed the flowers on the table and updated him. "Mike, your driver, has a sprained wrist and some bruises, but he's home resting. He sends his regards." Cassie listened quietly, feeling like she'd just stepped into another part of Julian's life. Emma sat, recounting how she had flown in the moment she heard. "Our parents have been gone a long time. It's always been just the two of us," she said, looking at her brother. "You've always kept things to yourself. But this time, I really thought I'd lost you." Julian squeezed her hand. "I'm okay, because of Cassie." Emma looked at Cassie with gratitude. "Looks like my brother finally found someone worth trusting." Rachel shifted the conversation to work, explaining that she was coordinating with police about the crash. Moments later, Detective Ramirez arrived, handing Julian a business card. "The brake lines were cut," Ramirez said grimly. "We received an anonymous threat targeting your project. Our prime suspect is Martin Kessler." Julian's expression darkened. He explained how Kessler had manipulated both Elise and Cassie for personal gain. Cassie froze at the name, pain flashing across her face. "We'll help the police," she said firmly. "He's hurt enough people." Julian gave her a look full of respect. Emma nodded. "I'll provide any legal support needed." Once Ramirez and Emma departed, Rachel lingered just long enough to urge Julian to rest. "The company's fine, boss. Just focus on healing," she said, then winked at Cassie before leaving. Silence returned to the room, intimate and still. Julian turned to Cassie, his voice softer. "Your voice didn't just save me, it can inspire others." He proposed that she perform at the Foundation's major upcoming event once he recovered, so the world could hear her gift. Cassie blushed. "I'm not a star, Julian." He smiled faintly, despite the pain. "You're my star." Cassie shared stories of the kids in Pennsylvania, how they were learning chords and writing their first lyrics. Julian listened, his eyes gleaming. "You make me want to live better," he said. Cassie leaned down and kissed his forehead, a soft, reverent touch. "Then you better get well," she whispered. "I still have so many songs for you." She placed her notebook on the bedside table, open to a new song. "In the quiet, I found you." Julian reached out, touching the page. His eyes said he understood. This song belonged to them. Cassie stepped into the hallway, sat on a bench, and whispered a quiet prayer. "Thank you, God, for keeping us." Her faith had carried her through fear, and now it lifted her toward hope. Outside the hospital, New York glittered, its lights like scattered notes waiting to be sung. Julian and Cassie had found each other again, fragile but real. And with Cassie's music as their bridge, they would begin anew, trusting that fate and faith would guide their next verse together. You're watching Soul Stories, home of original, heart-touching tales. Leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe. This story lives here and only here. Thank you for being with us. Chapter 5. Building a Future Together. 3 months after the accident, New York was wrapped in the golden glow of autumn. Leaves danced across the sidewalks, and the chill in the air carried the scent of change. Julian Hayes, though still walking with a cane, had finally left Mount Sinai and returned to his Manhattan penthouse. The scar on his forehead had faded, but his eyes shone brighter than ever, thanks to Cassie Monroe. She was by his side every day, her guitar slung over her shoulder, her smile like sunlight in every room. Her faith in God and in the destiny that had brought them through darkness was the wind beneath them both. Now, hand in hand, they were rebuilding what had once been broken. Cassie, now a co-founder of Julian's Scholarship Foundation, threw herself into reviving the project. Together, they planned a benefit concert at Lincoln Center, blending music and mission to support underprivileged students. Though nervous, Cassie agreed to headline the event, bringing Streetlight Lullaby and a new song, Quiet Light, to the stage. Julian, still in recovery, managed the work from home, with Rachel, his steadfast assistant, handling logistics. Emma, Julian's sister, flew in from Boston to provide legal support, ensuring the foundation ran smoothly. Each morning, Cassie arrived at Julian's penthouse with coffee from their favorite Williamsburg cafe and her lyric notebook in hand. They sat by the window overlooking Central Park, talking about the foundation and about the future. Julian, once guarded, opened up more each day, telling her stories of his childhood with Emma, playing piano in their parents' home in Connecticut. Cassie spoke of writing songs in her Brooklyn apartment to keep the pain at bay. "I think God gave me music," she whispered one morning, fingers touching the cross in her pocket, "so I could find you." Julian smiled, lacing his fingers with hers. "And I thank him for that." One crisp afternoon, they walked slowly through Central Park, leaves falling like golden confetti around them. Julian's steps were careful but sure. They paused at Bow Bridge, where sunlight shimmered on the water like scattered notes. Julian, in a soft navy sweater, reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver ring, engraved with 2 simple words, First kiss. His eyes met hers, steady and sincere. Cassie, he said, voice low, our first kiss started as a dare, but it became the beginning of everything. If that was chapter one, would you write the rest of our story with me? Cassie blinked, her eyes filling with tears. She thought of that night at the gala, of his voice in the ICU calling her family, of his hand in hers when he came back to life. She nodded, voice trembling. Yes, Julian, forever. He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, clumsily with the cane, but with all the warmth of a man reborn. They kissed, gentle, deep, like a prayer answered. Cassie whispered, thank you, God, for bringing us here. Julian kissed her forehead. And for bringing me you. Back at the penthouse, Rachel was waiting with news from Detective Ramirez. The police found evidence, she said, handing Julian an iPad. A former employee of Kessler confessed. He hired someone to sabotage your brakes. Emma arrived moments later, adding, I've spoken with attorneys in New York. Kessler won't walk away from this. Julian squeezed Cassie's hand, his expression resolute. He hurt both of us, he said. Now, we end this. Cassie nodded, a sense of peace washing over her. The ghost of Martin Kessler no longer held power over them. The night of the Lincoln Center concert arrived like a hush before a song. Cassie stood backstage, clutching her guitar, heart pounding. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair loose, her nerves electric. Julian sat in the front row beside Emma and Rachel. His eyes held pride, reverence, love. Mike, his driver, his arm fully healed, was there too, clapping enthusiastically. As the lights dimmed and then rose, Cassie stepped onto the stage. She opened with Streetlight Lullaby. Under streetlights were just strangers. The audience fell into reverent silence, then erupted into applause. She followed with Quiet Light, the song she'd written in the hospital. In the quiet, I found you through the darkness. Faith pulled through. Her lyrics told their story, from an impulsive kiss to a confession beside a hospital bed. By the final note, the crowd was on its feet, many with tears in their eyes. Julian's heart swelled. The press later called her an indie voice with soul, the future of New York music. But for Cassie, the only review that mattered was the look in Julian's eyes. You are my everything. After the show, they hosted a small gathering at the penthouse. Emma raised her glass, teasing, I never thought my buttoned-up brother would get engaged to a rising star. Rachel grinned. I bet Mike didn't see it coming either. He's been retelling that romantic hospital saga all week. Mike shrugged from the corner. I just drive the car, but I knew she was special from day one. Cassie blushed, leaning into Julian's shoulder. He kissed her hair and whispered, You make everything better. When the guests had left, Julian and Cassie stood at the window, gazing down at Central Park. She strummed a few gentle chords on her guitar, a new melody humming to life, one still without lyrics. Julian wrapped his arms around her from behind, his voice soft. Write this one for us. Cassie nodded, her fingers brushing the ring marked first kiss, and in her heart, she whispered, Thank you, God, for giving us a future. Her music, now part of their shared life, flowed like the city lights below, guiding them forward. Hand in hand, they faced the unknown. With love and faith, nothing could break them. Martin Kessler remained a name in a file, no longer a shadow. Cassie and Julian, bound by music and fate, were writing their next song together. A song called Forever. 1 year after the accident, Manhattan shimmered in lights for the charity gala at the same glass tower in Midtown, where Cassie Monroe and Julian Hayes had first met. The marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers that sparkled like musical notes, and the laughter of the elite mingled with the clinking of wine glasses. Cassie stood backstage, dressed in a radiant red gown that hugged her figure, a guitar in her arms and her heart pounding. Tonight she wasn't a bartender. She was the star of the evening, about to perform Forever's song, a piece written about her and Julian's journey, from a daring kiss to a lifelong promise. Julian, fully recovered, stood near the stage, his black tux accentuating his steady frame. The faint scar on his forehead was the only visible trace of the past, but his eyes gleamed as he watched Cassie. Their scholarship fund had now supported hundreds of students, and tonight's gala celebrated that success. Emma sat at the front table, eyes shining with pride. Rachel, ever the multitasker, was overseeing logistics while whispering to Mike, who had returned to work after the crash. "She's going to make everyone cry," Rachel murmured. Mike nodded, smiling. "I knew from the first time I saw her sing." Cassie stepped into the spotlight, her hair cascading over her shoulders. She strummed the first chord, her voice clear and soulful as Forever's song began. "From a dare to a dream, you found me. In the chaos, love crowned me." The lyrics trace their love story, from that impulsive kiss at a gala, to a whispered "I love you" in a hospital room, to the first kiss ring beneath the trees of Central Park. The room stilled. Many reached for tissues as tears welled up. Julian watched, heart full, remembering the first time she sang Streetlight Lullaby. She had cracked open the walls around his heart, and now she was his world. As the final note lingered, the crowd rose to their feet, applause thunderous. Cassie smiled and bowed, but her eyes searched only for Julian. He walked onto the stage, took the microphone, and spoke, his voice low, clear, unwavering. "1 year ago, in this very place, one kiss broke down every wall I had." He turned to her, gaze locked. The audience buzzed, sensing something monumental. He knelt, pulling a gold ring from his jacket, more brilliant than the first, but still engraved with the words, "First Kiss." "Cassie Monroe," he said, "you gave me a family, a song, a life. Will you turn our first kiss into our forever kiss?" Cassie's eyes shimmered with tears. She looked at the man who had once doubted her, nearly lost her, but now stood as her everything. "Yes, Julian," she whispered, "forever." The room erupted. Applause, cheers, a few joyful whistles. Julian slipped the ring onto her finger and rose, pulling her into his arms. They kissed, not as a dare, but as a promise. Cassie whispered, fingers brushing the cross in her dress pocket. "Thank you, God, for him." Julian kissed her forehead and echoed, "And for you." Emma stood, clapping through tears. "My stubborn little brother finally got it right," she said to Rachel, laughing. Rachel raised her phone to capture the moment. "This is definitely going viral." Mike nodded, warm-eyed. "They earned it." In a corner, Lena shouted, "You better get married fast, Monroe." Cassie laughed, leaning into Julian. It felt like the whole world was singing with her. After the proposal, she returned to the stage and sang Quiet Light, the song born in the silence of the ICU. Her voice soared through lyrics of faith and love that had carried them through darkness. The crowd rose again, tears in their eyes. The press later wrote, "Cassie Monroe isn't just a voice, she's the soul of New York." Julian watched from the wings, his heart full. This song, their story, it all proved fate had chosen right. The night wound down, but the joy didn't end. Rachel returned with news. "Detective Ramirez just emailed. They've arrested Martin Kessler. Full confession, solid evidence." Emma, calling from Boston, said firmly, "He won't walk free this time. I'll see to it." Julian squeezed Cassie's hand. "He's the past." Cassie nodded, a sense of release washing over her. Martin Kessler, who once tried to manipulate and destroy, was no longer a shadow in their lives. They stepped out into the night, the city glowing around them like a living symphony. Cassie held Julian's hand, the first kiss ring gleaming in moonlight. They made a quick stop at a nearby recording studio, where Cassie, with help from the Foundation's team, had recorded the final version of Forever's song. When it was released, the track soared up the indie charts, quickly becoming a phenomenon. But to Cassie, the true success was watching Julian listen to it, eyes lit up as if hearing her heart. In the car with Mike driving, they passed Central Park, where Julian had first proposed. He wrapped his arm around her and murmured, "Write a new song for our wedding." Cassie smiled, nodded, and touched the cross at her neck. She whispered silently, "Thank you, God, for this future." Her music now pulsed with their shared life, like the lights of New York guiding them forward. With faith, with love, and with melody, they were ready for forever. The wind howled through the bare branches on the outskirts of Boston, carrying a bone-deep chill. Maya huddled in the driver's seat of her '98 Honda Civic, the cracked seat covers faintly musty. Parked beneath the buzzing lights of a 24-hour gas station, the car was more home than vehicle now. In the back seat, her 4-year-old daughter Lily slept beneath a pile of old blankets from a thrift store, her tiny breaths fogging the cold air. The dashboard clock blinked 9:47 p.m., its dim green light the only illumination in the dark cabin. Maya's stomach growled, a painful reminder that their last meal had been half a peanut butter sandwich scrounged from a church earlier that morning. She pulled her thin coat tighter around her, hardly a match for the cold, and counted the coins in her palm: 2 quarters, a dime, and a crumpled $1 bill. It was all she had left after a day of off-the-books dishwashing at a local diner. Not enough for a hot meal, even for Lily, but maybe enough for a cup of gas station coffee to warm her hands. She glanced back at her daughter, her small face peeking from the blankets, cheeks flushed in sleep. For her, Maya would keep going. She always did. Quietly, she stepped out of the car, locked the door, and stuffed the keys into her pocket. The neon sign above the station buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow onto the cracked pavement. Her boots crunched softly over the thin layer of snow as she walked toward the door. Inside, the cashier barely looked up from his phone, and the air reeked of stale cigarettes and burnt coffee. She poured a small cup, the cheapest kind, and handed over the 2 quarters and the dime. The $1 bill stayed in her pocket, a fragile lifeline she couldn't bring herself to let go of yet. As she stepped back into the cold, clutching the styrofoam cup, she noticed him, a man standing at the edge of the parking lot where the pavement met a strip of dead grass. He was tall, wearing a tailored wool coat that seemed out of place in this run-down corner of the city. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, shoulders hunched against the wind. His face, half lit by the street lamp, looked worn out, like someone who had wandered too far from where they belonged. Maya hesitated. He didn't look like the usual drifters she saw around the station, but there was something about his stillness that caught her attention. She walked over slowly, boots scraping against the ground. "Hey," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Are you okay?" The man turned, startled, his eyes meeting hers. They were pale gray, sharp but clouded with something she couldn't quite place, maybe sorrow or exhaustion. Up close, she saw the lines around his mouth, the stubble on his chin. He was older than her, probably in his 30s, but carried the weight of someone much older. "I'm fine," he said, his voice low and clipped. He looked away toward the empty road. Maya frowned. His coat was expensive, his shoes polished despite the slush, but his hands were empty. No phone, no wallet, nothing. She'd seen enough desperate people to know when someone was stuck, even if they didn't look it. "You sure? It's freezing. Do you need to call someone? Get a cab or something?" He shook his head, a bitter, hollow smile flickering across his lips. "No cabs, no one to call." Her chest tightened. She knew that feeling too well, the hollow ache of having no one to turn to. She hesitated, her fingers brushing the crumpled bill in her pocket. It was all she had, the last line between her and utter despair. But this man, standing alone in the bitter cold, looked like he needed it more. Maybe it would get him a bus ticket or a cup of coffee to get through the night. "Here," she said, pulling out the worn bill and holding it toward him. "It's not much, but it might help. There's a payphone inside if you need to call someone." His eyes widened, moving from her face to the bill in her hand. For a moment, he didn't move, as if her gesture had frozen him in place. "You don't have to do that," he said, his voice softer now, almost disbelieving. "I know," Maya replied, looking straight into his eyes, "but sometimes even a little can help." She pushed the bill closer, her fingers trembling from the cold. He looked at her, unreadable, then shook his head again. "Keep it. You need it more than I do." She bristled, not at the words but at the truth in them. The worn coat, the dark circles under her eyes, the shaking hands. They told a story she couldn't hide. Still, she tucked the bill into his palm, curling his fingers around it. "Take it," she said firmly, "please." Before he could argue, she turned and walked back toward the car, coffee cup still warm in her hands. She didn't look back, didn't want to see whether he kept the money or let it blow away in the wind. Giving it away felt like releasing a shard of her own fear, a fleeting moment of control in a life that had given her so few choices. Back in the car, she slipped into the driver's seat and checked on Lily, still fast asleep, clutching a one-eared stuffed bunny. Maya leaned her head back, the warmth of the coffee sinking into her hands. She thought of the man out there, wondering where he would go, whether he'd be okay. She didn't know his name, didn't know his story, but for a brief moment their lives had touched. Two strangers connected by a dollar bill in a flicker of shared humanity. Across the lot, Julian Roth stood motionless, the crumpled bill still in his hand. The cold bit at his face, but he barely felt it. His mind replayed the encounter, the woman's tired eyes, her quiet determination, the way she had given away the last of what she had without a second thought. He had come to this forgotten corner of the city to escape, to test a world he no longer believed in. People were selfish, he had told himself. Kindness was a myth, a transaction dressed up in virtue, and yet this woman, with nothing but her name, had proved him wrong. He looked down at the dollar, the paper softened by countless hands. It felt heavier than it should, weighted by her sacrifice. He tucked it into his coat pocket, his fingers lingering on the edge. For the first time in months, something stirred in his chest. Not quite hope, but a crack in the armor he had built around himself. As Maya's car sat quietly in the lot, windows fogged with breath, Julian turned and walked into the darkness. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she came from or where she was going. But he knew one thing. He would find her again. Not to repay her, not out of pity, but because in her act of kindness, she had reminded him of something he thought he'd lost forever. Julian Roth sat in his office on the 47th floor of a gleaming glass tower in downtown Boston, the city lights below stretching out like a glittering, artificial carpet. The computer screen in front of him displayed financial reports, numbers dancing across the display, unread and ignored. His mind drifted, pulled back to that freezing night at the gas station on the outskirts of town, to the tired yet resilient eyes of the woman who had handed him a crumpled $1 bill. That bill now sat in his wallet, not to be spent, but as evidence, a reminder of something he couldn't yet name. Julian's life had once been a string of victories. CEO of Roth Enterprises at 34, the head of a real estate and tech empire worth billions. But in recent months, everything had collapsed. His longtime girlfriend, Claire, had betrayed him with his closest business partner. His younger brother, Ethan, the only person he had ever truly trusted, had taken his own life after years of struggling with depression. Those losses had shredded Julian's faith in people. He had grown cold, closed off, viewing the world through a lens of suspicion. And then, the woman at the gas station, someone with nothing but kindness, had cracked the wall he'd built around himself. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and left the office, ignoring the curious stares of his employees. His personal driver, Marcus, was already waiting beside a sleek black Bentley. "Where to, sir?" Marcus asked, voice steady. "The gas station on Route 128, Julian replied, eyes fixed on the window. Marcus didn't ask questions, just nodded and merged into the night traffic. The gas station looked the same as that night, the neon sign still buzzing, the air thick with the scent of gasoline and cold. Julian stepped inside, his tailored wool coat once again out of place in the rundown setting. The cashier, a wiry young man with messy hair, looked up from his phone. "What do you need?" the kid asked, voice uninterested. "I need to see the security footage from Tuesday night," Julian said calmly, with a tone that didn't allow for refusal. He pulled out a $100 bill and placed it on the counter. "Just a few minutes." The cashier looked at the bill, then back at Julian, clearly weighing the decision. Finally, he shrugged and led Julian into a small back room, where an aging monitor displayed the grainy feed from the cameras. Julian watched intently, rewinding to the footage from that night. His heartbeat quickened when he saw himself, standing at the edge of the lot. And then her, the woman with the tousled brown hair and worn coat, approaching with a cup of coffee in hand. She said something, then held out the dollar bill. The footage was blurry, but her eyes, bright and unwavering, etched themselves into his memory again. "Does she come around often?" Julian asked, eyes still locked on the screen. "The woman?" The cashier shrugged. Sometimes lives in that old car parked out back, bluish Honda Civic. Has a kid with her. Julian nodded, absorbing every detail. He left the gas station without taking back the 100. Out behind the station, the lot was nearly empty, just a few trucks in a swirl of windblown trash. He walked along the row of vehicles, his pulse quickening as he spotted the old Civic, its windows fogged from breath inside. He stopped a few steps away, suddenly feeling like an intruder. Inside the car, Maya sat holding Lily close to keep her warm. Tonight was colder, and the gas tank was nearly empty, which meant no heat. She had just finished telling a story about an adventurous bunny, her voice soft so as not to wake her daughter. Suddenly, a shadow appeared outside the window, startling her. She tightened her arms around Lily, heart pounding. The man, the one from the other night, with the expensive coat and gray eyes, was standing there, staring into the car. She rolled the window down a crack, just enough to speak. "What do you want?" she asked sharply, her tone laced with the protectiveness of a mother. Julian raised his hand, signaling he meant no harm. "I'm not here to bother you," he said, voice deep and slow. "I just wanted to thank you for that night." Maya frowned, the memory of the $1 bill flashing in her mind. "I don't need thanks. Just glad you're okay." She started to roll the window back up, but he spoke again. "I can help you," he said, his tone sincere but hesitant. "You and the little girl, you shouldn't have to live like this." His words cut like a blade, not from cruelty, but because they struck a nerve she kept buried deep. She knew her life was hard, living in a car, begging for leftovers, no future for Lily. But hearing a stranger say it out loud felt like being stripped bare. "We're fine," she said, her voice stiffening. "I don't need pity." "It's not pity," Julian replied quickly, stepping a little closer. "I just want to help. A place to stay, food, whatever you need." Maya looked at him, searching his pale eyes for some hidden motive. He didn't seem like a liar, but she had learned the hard way that trusting strangers was a dangerous gamble. Lily's father, who once promised her the world, had vanished the moment she got pregnant. Others, neighbors, old coworkers, had turned their backs when she lost her job after a car accident. The world was not kind, and she couldn't afford to risk Lily's safety. "Thanks, but no," she said firmly. "We can take care of ourselves." She rolled the window back up, ending the conversation. Julian stood still as the window closed. He wanted to say something, to convince her, but the words caught in his throat. He knew he had no right to push, no right to interfere in her life. But when he looked at that old Civic, at the rust in the fogged-up glass, he felt an unfamiliar ache. Not pity, but helplessness. She, with all that she lacked, had given him more than anyone ever had in his polished, glittering world. He turned back to his own car, where Marcus waited, engine still running. "Home?" Marcus asked. "Not yet," Julian said, eyes still on the Honda. "I'll come back tomorrow." That night in his penthouse, Julian couldn't sleep. He stood by the window looking down at the city, the $1 bill lying on his desk like a challenge. He thought about Maya, about how she had rejected him. Not out of pride, but because she didn't believe in kindness. Just like he once didn't. But she was different from him. She still gave, even when she had nothing left. He opened his laptop and began researching local shelters and organizations that supported the homeless in Boston. He didn't know where to begin, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to give up. Not because he owed her, but because she had awakened something in him he thought was long dead. The belief that even the smallest act of kindness could change everything. The snow had fallen heavier that morning, covering Maya's Honda Civic in a thin white coat. Inside the car, the air was icy cold, even though Maya had wrapped another scarf around Lily to keep her warm. The little girl, her blonde hair tousled, was playing with her stuffed bunny, whispering an imagined tale about Adventure Bunny. Maya smiled, but the fatigue in her eyes betrayed her. She had barely slept the night before, worrying about the nearly empty gas tank and the few coins left in her pocket. Not enough for even a basic breakfast. Outside, a black Bentley quietly pulled into the corner of the lot. Julian Roth stepped out, holding a large canvas bag, his breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. He wore a gray wool coat, simpler than the one from the previous day, as if trying to blend into the rough surroundings. But his eyes, sharp and filled with resolve, hadn't changed. He approached the Honda Civic with slow, careful steps, as though not wanting to startle whoever was inside. Maya recognized him through the fogged window, her heartbeat quickening. This man, with his strange persistence, stirred both curiosity and caution in her. She rolled down the window just a crack, her voice cold. "You again? I already told you. We don't need help." Julian didn't respond right away. He set the canvas bag on the ground and pulled out a thick navy wool blanket, a fresh loaf of bread, still warm to the touch, and a small carton of milk. "It's not help," he said, voice low and sincere. "Just a friend bringing a few things. For the little one, it's freezing out here." Maya looked at the blanket, then at Lily, who was trembling slightly despite wearing 2 layers. Her pride screamed at her, but her love for her daughter was louder. She opened the car door and stepped out, her boots crunching against the snow. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, eyes wary. "You don't owe me anything." Julian gave a small shrug, almost sheepish. "You gave me something. I just want to give something back." He held the blanket out to her, his gaze gentle but unwavering. Maya hesitated, then took it. She returned to the car and wrapped the blanket around Lily, feeling the softness and warmth of the wool. Lily beamed, hugging the blanket as if it were a treasure. "Mommy, it's so warm," she squealed, making Maya's heart ache. She turned back and quietly accepted the bread and milk from Julian. "Thank you," she murmured. From that day on, Julian came by every day, always on time like clockwork. Sometimes it was a bag of apples, other times a pair of gloves for Lily, or a thermos of hot water so they could stay warm. He never forced her to take anything, just left the items quietly and chatted with her like an old friend. Maya, though still guarded, began to grow used to his presence. Once she even caught herself waiting for him, though she wouldn't dare admit it. One afternoon, when the snow had stopped and weak sunlight broke through the clouds, Julian sat on an old wooden crate near the car, splitting a loaf of bread with Maya. Lily was napping inside, curled up with the navy blanket. "You don't talk much about yourself," Julian said gently, "but I'd like to listen. If you ever feel like sharing." Maya looked at him, her gaze uncertain. It had been a long time since she talked about the past, a wound that never quite healed. But there was something about Julian, the way he listened without judgment, that made the words come out. "I used to be a nurse," she began quietly. "Worked at St. Mary's Hospital. It wasn't a dream job, but it was enough for me and Lily to live okay. Then, there was a car accident, a drunk driver. I fractured a few ribs, couldn't work for months. The hospital bills piled up, and I couldn't pay rent. Eventually, it was just me in this car." Julian listened without interrupting, and a flicker of pain passed through his eyes. He thought of his own life, full of privilege, yet empty, and felt a quiet respect for the woman sitting across from him. "You're stronger than you think," he said sincerely. "Not everyone would keep fighting the way you have." Maya gave a small, tired smile and shook her head. "Fighting? I'm just trying not to let Lily go hungry." But deep down, his words touched her, a small light breaking through the darkness. Snow still drifted lightly over the back lot behind the gas station, dusting Maya's Honda Civic in a thin white layer. Inside the car, the air was bitterly cold despite Maya having tightly wrapped Lily in the navy wool blanket Julian had brought weeks ago. The little girl, playing with her stuffed bunny, let out a big yawn, her eyelids heavy with sleep. Maya watched her, heart weighed down. Life in the car, though familiar by now, was still a painful reminder that she hadn't yet given Lily the life she deserved. Every night, Maya lay awake worrying about tomorrow, about food, about the cold, about a future that felt more uncertain each day. Julian appeared that morning, as he had become a routine presence, carrying a bag of fresh bread and a thermos of hot coffee. He tapped gently on the car window, his expression softer, yet carrying a new kind of resolve. Maya cracked the door open, surprised to see not just food in his hands, but a rare seriousness in his face. "Maya," he began, his voice calm but firm, "I want to talk. About you and Lily." She frowned, guardedness rising. "What about us?" she asked, unconsciously tightening the blanket around Lily. Julian took a deep breath, as if preparing to take a leap. I know you don't want charity, I get it, but I want to help you and Lily find a place to stay. A small apartment on Elm Street, not far from here. I'll pay the rent for the first year. Lily can go to preschool. You'll have time to rebuild. His words hit her like a slow-burning fuse. An apartment? A real home? With walls, a door, and hot water? The thought felt like both a dream and a trap. She shook her head, her voice unsteady. No, Julian, I can't. It's too much. I don't want to owe you. It's not a debt, Julian replied quickly, stepping closer, his eyes so sincere she had to look away. It's for Lily. She deserves a bed, a safe place. You don't owe me anything. Just let me do this. Maya looked at Lily, still smiling at her stuffed bunny, unaware of the conversation that might change her life. Maya thought of the cold nights when she held her daughter close just to keep her warm, the days she skipped meals so Lily could have a bite of bread. Her pride screamed, but her love for her daughter was stronger than anything. She took a deep breath, tears threatening to spill, and whispered, "Okay, but only for Lily." The day they moved in, it was still cold, but the sun peeked weakly through the clouds as if trying to welcome them. Julian drove them to Elm Street, a quiet road lined with old oak trees and modest homes. The apartment was on the second floor of a red brick building, with creaky wooden stairs and a hallway that faintly smelled of fresh paint. When Julian opened the door, Maya stepped inside, heart pounding. The apartment was small but clean, with a tiny living room, a compact kitchen, and a bedroom just big enough for a full bed and a child's bed. Cream-colored walls reflected the sunlight, and a weathered wooden table sat by the window, overlooking the snow-covered street. There was a small bathroom with a simple sink and a shower, which Maya looked at as if it were a miracle. Julian stood silently in the doorway, letting her and Lily explore on their own. Lily darted straight to the bedroom, squealing when she saw the little bed with pastel sheets and pillows. "Mommy, look! My bed!" she shouted, leaping onto the mattress and hugging a pillow tight. Maya smiled, but the smile faded as she stepped into the bathroom. She turned the faucet on, and warm steam rose from the tap, curling around her fingers like an embrace. It had been over 2 years since she'd felt hot water on her skin, and that simple luxury overwhelmed her. She locked the bathroom door, leaned back against the wall, and let the water run over her hands. The tears came quietly at first, then in heavy, uncontrollable sobs. She cried for the years spent living in a car, for the nights she feared Lily might not make it through the cold, for the shame of feeling like she had failed as a mother. But she also cried in gratitude, for Julian, for this chance, for the glimmer of hope that she might rebuild. Her tears mixed with the steam, and for that moment she let herself dissolve, grieving, but also letting go. Outside, Julian stood in the living room, hands in his pockets, listening to the muffled sobs through the door. He didn't knock, didn't say anything, just stood there, his chest heavy. He thought of the money he'd spent on this apartment, a small sum for someone like him, and realized it was nothing compared to the kindness Maya had given him that night at the gas station. Money could buy a roof, but only kindness could reach the heart. Maya had taught him that. When Maya came out, eyes red but composed, she found Julian in the kitchen, quietly unpacking a bag of groceries, milk, bread, pasta, and a jar of tomato sauce. "I thought you might want to cook something tonight," he said awkwardly. "A real meal." She looked at him, wanting to say something. "Thank you, I'm sorry," or to explain her tears, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded and whispered, "Thank you, Julian." "Really?" He smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "You don't need to thank me. Just keep letting Lily laugh like that." He nodded toward the bedroom, where the little girl was stretched across her new bed, pretending to sleep with her bunny tucked under her chin. "I'll go now," Julian said. "If you need anything, just call." As he left, Maya stood in the middle of the apartment, holding Lily as the child ran into her arms. She looked around, the walls, the beds, the hot running water, and felt something unfamiliar, safety. For the first time in years, she didn't have to worry about tonight or tomorrow. She knew the road ahead was still long, but this apartment, small as it was was a beginning, and in her heart, a seed of hope began to grow, planted by the kindness of a man who had once been a stranger. Early spring sunlight filtered through the window of the small Elm Street apartment, casting a warm glow on the kitchen table where Maya was preparing breakfast for Lily. A plate of toast and a glass of milk. Simple, yet for the two of them, it felt like a luxury. Maya watched Lily, who was humming a made-up song while coloring on a piece of paper, and for the first time in a long while, her heart felt light. This apartment, small as it was, had given them a new beginning. But deep down, Maya knew she needed more. A job, a way to stand on her own, not relying on Julian's kindness forever. As if he had read her thoughts, Julian showed up one morning with a new offer. He stood at the door holding a paper bag filled with pastries, his expression a little sheepish. "Maya," he began, "I have a friend who manages a cafe downtown. They're looking for a part-time worker. Nothing too heavy, just serving and cleaning up. I thought maybe you'd be interested." Maya paused mid-pour, milk carton in hand. A job? The idea excited her and terrified her. It had been 2 years since she last worked as a nurse, and the car accident had stolen much of her confidence. I don't know," she said hesitant. "I don't have cafe experience. And Lily—" "It's just mornings," Julian interrupted gently. "While Lily's at preschool, the manager's name is Sarah. She's kind and trustworthy. Just give it a try." Maya looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of pity, but all she saw was sincerity. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, I'll try." On her first day at the cafe, Maya's hands trembled as she tied on her apron. Brew Haven sat on a busy street corner with red brick walls and the rich scent of freshly roasted coffee drifting through the air. Sarah, the manager, was a warm, middle-aged woman with a kind smile who walked Maya through the basics of making cappuccinos and taking orders. Maya stumbled at first, spilled a latte, mixed up an order, but slowly she found her rhythm. Every customer's smile, every small compliment from Sarah became a brick in rebuilding her confidence. Julian often stopped by, not overtly, just enough to check on her. He'd sit in a corner, pretending to read the newspaper, but his eyes always drifted toward Maya. She found that his presence no longer made her nervous. Instead, it felt like an anchor, a quiet reminder that she wasn't alone. One evening after her shift, Julian invited Maya and Lily to dinner at a nearby family restaurant. "Just pizza," he said with a casual shrug, as if it were nothing. But to Lily, it was a grand adventure. She clutched Julian's hand and called him Mr. Warm because of the blanket he'd once brought, chattering excitedly about preschool. Maya watched her daughter, then looked at Julian, her heart swelling with gratitude. And something deeper she wasn't quite ready to name. In the restaurant's soft golden lighting, a steaming cheese pizza sat at the center of the table. Lily drew circles on a napkin with a crayon while Maya and Julian talked. She told him about her day at work, about a customer who had tipped her $5, and her smile shone. No trace of the fear that had once haunted her. Julian watched her, heart racing. In that moment, with Maya's smile lighting up the room, he realized he didn't just want to help her. He wanted to be with her. He wanted to see that smile every day. For the first time in years, Julian felt a strange sense of peace, as if a fractured piece of his soul was slowly beginning to mend. Everything seemed to be falling into place, until one afternoon, as Maya was clearing a table at the cafe, a familiar face walked through the door. It was Carla, a former co-worker from St. Mary's Hospital, someone Maya hadn't seen since she lost her job. Carla, with her glossy blonde hair and lively voice, threw her arms around Maya. "Oh my God, Maya, I thought you'd vanished off the face of the earth." They sat down during Maya's break and chatted about old times. Carla asked about Maya's life, and she shared the basics, about the apartment, the new job, and a friend who had helped her. When she mentioned Julian's name, Carla's eyes widened. "Julian? You mean Julian Roth? The guy who comes in here wearing a gray coat, looking like he just stepped out of a magazine?" Maya nodded, slightly confused. "Yeah, that's him. Why?" Carla let out a laugh as if Maya had just told a joke. "Why? Maya, you're talking about Julian Roth, CEO of Roth Enterprises. He's a millionaire. owns half this city. You didn't know? The world stopped spinning. Maya felt the blood drain from her face, her hands trembling. Julian, just a regular office guy? No, he was a CEO, someone from a world she had no access to. Everything he had done, the apartment, the job, the dinners, suddenly felt like charity. The pity of a wealthy man for a homeless woman? She felt like a fool, a puppet in his well-meaning game. I, I have to go, Maya mumbled, standing up. Carla called after her, but she didn't hear. One thought pulsed in her mind. She had allowed herself to trust him, and now she felt betrayed, even though he had never lied. Maya stood frozen in the cafe, the coffee cup in her hand gone cold. Carla's words echoed like a knife. Julian Roth, CEO of Roth Enterprises. He's a millionaire, owns half the city. Each word cut deeper, shredding the fragile illusion Maya had been clinging to these past weeks. She felt dizzy, as if the ground beneath her feet had given way. Julian, the man she thought was just a kind soul with tired gray eyes, wasn't who she believed. He was a stranger, someone from a world she only saw on TV, a world people like her didn't belong in. She clenched her apron, fingernails digging into her palms to keep from shaking. Memories of the past weeks played in her mind like a painful reel. The warm blanket he'd brought, the apartment on Elm Street, the cafe job. She had believed it was kindness, a bond between two people who had touched the bottom of pain. But now everything looked different, cold, calculated. He wasn't a companion, he was a millionaire. And she was just a charity case, a wounded sparrow he picked up to feel better about himself. That truth stabbed her deeper than any hurt she'd known. She thought about Lily, her daughter's radiant smile when she called Julian Mr. Warm. Maya had let her daughter, the most precious part of her, open up to someone she didn't truly know. The fear that overwhelmed her wasn't about Julian causing harm. It was that she had trusted him, believed in a world where kindness didn't come with strings. She'd once believed that, with Lily's father, and it had left her with a shattered heart and a child to raise alone. History was repeating itself, and she felt foolish and weak. Tears threatened to rise, but Maya bit her lip and forced them down. She couldn't fall apart. Not here, not in front of Carla, or the customers chatting nearby. But inside she was torn in two. One part wanted to run to Julian, to demand the truth, to believe he hadn't meant to deceive her. The other part wanted to build a wall, to lock her heart so it could never be hurt again. The distance between her and Julian wasn't just about money or status anymore. It was a chasm of shattered trust, and she didn't know how to cross it. From that day on, Maya began to pull away. She was still polite when Julian visited the cafe, but her smile became strained, her replies short. She declined his dinner invitations, saying she was busy with Lily. Julian noticed the change, but he didn't know why. He asked Sarah. He even asked Lily, but no one had answers. Each time Maya avoided his gaze, Julian felt a strange, rising fear. The fear of losing her, the fear of losing the one thing that had made him feel alive again. One evening, he waited outside the cafe, hoping to catch her after her shift. When she stepped out, he approached, voice quiet but urgent. Maya, is something wrong? You've changed. If I did something, please tell me. Maya stopped and looked at him. Her eyes were full of hurt, but also resolve. I don't know who you are, Julian, she said, her voice shaking. I thought you were just a regular guy. But you're Julian Roth. You live in a world I don't belong to. Julian froze, realizing his secret was out. He wanted to explain, to say he didn't care about money or titles, that she had changed him. But before he could speak, Maya turned and walked into the night, leaving him standing there with a heavy heart. For the first time, Julian Roth, a man used to controlling everything, felt utterly powerless, because now he was facing something he couldn't buy. Maya's trust. The winter wind howled through the streets of Boston, carrying a biting cold and thick snow that blanketed everything in white. In the small apartment on Elm Street, Maya woke before dawn, a gnawing unease settling in her chest. She pulled the blanket over Lily, but when her hand brushed her daughter's forehead, she froze. Lily's skin was burning, her cheeks flushed an unnatural red. "Lily, sweetheart, what's wrong?" Maya whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Lily opened her eyes, her usually bright green gaze now heavy and clouded. "Mommy, I'm tired," she mumbled, then coughed, a dry, rasping sound that echoed in the quiet room. Maya rummaged through the cabinet for the fever medicine, but found only a nearly empty bottle. Not enough to ease Lily's fever. The nearest clinic was over a mile away, and her old car had broken down the previous week, stranded in the parking lot. She glanced out the window. Snow fell in a thick curtain, obscuring everything. But she had no choice. If she didn't act, Lily could get worse. She wrapped Lily in the green wool blanket Julian had brought weeks ago, lifting her small, trembling body into her arms. Maya tried calling Julian, but her phone had died the night before, leaving her with no way to reach him. A flicker of despair crossed her mind, but she pushed it aside, clutching Lily tightly and stepping outside. The cold bit into her skin, piercing through her thin layers and worn boots. Snow reached her ankles, each step a battle against the wind, and the fear screaming in her heart. In her mind, painful memories surged, nights clutching Lily in the car, praying she wouldn't fall ill. Days watching her daughter go hungry, powerless to help. She had vowed never to let Lily suffer again, but now carrying her through a blizzard, she felt like a failure once more. "I'm here, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking in the wind, tears threatening to spill. "Everything's going to be okay." But she wasn't sure if she was comforting Lily or herself. The road to the clinic felt endless. Snow clung to her hair and coat, weighing her down. Lily nestled against her chest, her breaths faint, and Maya's heart felt like it was being crushed. She stumbled on a patch of ice, nearly dropping Lily, but tightened her grip and stood, biting back the pain in her knee. She couldn't stop. She couldn't give up. Yet deep inside, a small voice whispered, "I'm not strong enough. I've never been enough." Just when she thought she might collapse, a figure emerged through the snow. Tall, familiar, wearing a gray coat. Julian. He ran toward her, his face pale with worry, eyes wide as he saw them. "Maya!" he called, his voice urgent, cutting through the wind. "I've been looking everywhere for you. Sarah said you didn't show up at the cafe and your phone wasn't working." His words faltered when he saw Lily in her arms, his gray eyes flashing with panic. Without another word, he shrugged off his coat, wrapping it around mother and daughter, then pulled them both into his arms, shielding them from the wind. His warmth seeped into Maya, but it was his presence, like a beacon piercing her darkness, that broke her. Tears spilled down her frozen cheeks, mingling with the snow. "I'm scared, Julian," she sobbed, her voice shattered. "I'm scared you're only pitying me. I'm scared I'm not enough for you." Julian held her tighter, his arms steady despite the howling wind. He leaned down, meeting her eyes, his gray gaze filled with pain, but also an unmistakable love. "Pity?" he said, his voice low but resolute, like a vow. "Maya, I've never seen anyone as strong as you. You fought through everything. For Lily, for yourself. You're the reason I believe in life again." He paused, his voice softening to a near whisper. "I'm here not to save you. I'm here because I need you." His words cut through the ice around Maya's heart like a blade. She leaned into his chest, tears soaking his shirt, feeling the steady beat of his heart against the wind. In that moment, amidst the thick snow, she no longer felt like a failed single mother or someone receiving pity. She felt loved, valued, not for what she had or didn't have, but for who she was. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this love. Julian guided them to the clinic, staying by their side as the doctor examined Lily. The fever was due to a throat infection, but the doctor assured them that with medicine and rest, she'd recover. Julian sat beside Maya in the waiting room, holding her hand, saying nothing but offering a presence that calmed her fears. When they returned to the apartment, Lily was asleep in Maya's arms, her breathing steadier thanks to the medicine. Julian brewed hot tea, setting it on the kitchen table, then stood at the door as if reluctant to intrude. "Thank you," Maya said, her voice soft but sincere. She looked at him, meeting his gaze without flinching for the first time. Not just for today, for everything. Julian smiled, a gentle, genuine smile. Don't thank me, Maya. Just let me stay by your side. He stepped outside, leaving her with Lily and a new feeling. Hope. In Maya's heart, a door had cracked open, leading to a future she had never dared to dream of. The warm golden light from the chandelier in the small Elm Street apartment cast a gentle glow over the dinner table, where Maya, Julian, and Lily shared a simple meal, pasta with tomato sauce and a bowl of salad. Lily, her cheeks smeared with sauce, rambled on about a bird at preschool, making Julian chuckle. Maya smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Inside, a quiet storm had been brewing, growing steadily since she and Julian had officially become a couple a few weeks earlier. Their relationship had started as a flicker, kindled by moments of sincerity, quick hand touches, late-night talks over tea, surprise hugs in the snow. Maya had opened her heart, just a little, hoping she might be worthy of this happiness. But Julian's world, a world of power, wealth, and constant spotlight, was starting to smother that flicker. It began when she overheard a conversation at Brewhaven. Two customers, clearly corporate types, were whispering about Julian Roth and the homeless girl. They snickered, calling her his latest toy, something amusing until he got bored. Maya stood behind the counter, gripping her dish towel, feeling stripped bare under the weight of a city's scrutiny. She tried to brush it off, told herself it was just gossip, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Then one morning, while scrolling her phone on break, a tabloid headline hit her like a punch. Millionaire Julian Roth infatuated with homeless single mom, love or charity project. The article dug into her past, life in the car, months of begging for leftovers, and twisted it into something cheap. They called her a gold digger, implying she had exploited Julian's kindness to climb the social ladder. Worse, the article included a blurry photo of her and Lily, snapped without permission as they left the apartment, making Maya feel like her private life was now a public circus. Her hands trembled as she read, breath caught in her throat. Each word felt like a blade, slicing through what little self-worth she had rebuilt. But what hurt most wasn't the insults. It was the fear that she was dragging Julian down. He was a CEO, a man with an empire built on reputation. And her? She was a single mom who once slept in her car and counted pennies for milk. How could she possibly belong in his world? How could she let him risk everything, his career, his name, his future for her? That fear clung to her like a shadow. Every time Julian came into the cafe, she noticed the customers' glances, at him, then at her, with curiosity or quiet contempt. She imagined the whispers at Roth Enterprises, boardroom disapproval, headlines yet to come. She thought about Lily growing up under the judgmental gaze of the world, being called the gold digger's daughter. The thought choked her, like someone was slowly crushing her chest. She began pulling away. When Julian invited her and Lily to dinner, she claimed exhaustion or said she needed to care for her daughter. When he reached for her hand, she gently pulled away, pretending to be busy cleaning or making coffee. Julian noticed the change. His eyes darkened with hurt, but he didn't push. He remained patient, still brought pastries for Lily, still sat quietly in the corner with a cooling cup of coffee, waiting for her to say something. But Maya couldn't. Every time she looked at him, she saw a world she didn't belong to, and the fear of destroying him overwhelmed any hope of love. One night after Lily had fallen asleep, Maya sat on the sofa, clutching a lukewarm cup of tea. Her gaze landed on a photo on the table, a Polaroid Julian had taken during their day at the park, all three of them laughing freely. Her smile in the photo now felt like a cruel reminder of what she was about to lose. What would you do if you were in Maya's shoes? Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. She thought of everything Julian had done, the blanket, the apartment, the job, that embrace in the snow. He had given her a new life, but she couldn't let him pay the price. She couldn't let their love become a stain on his name. She stood, picked up a sheet of paper, and began to write, her hand trembling. Julian, thank you for everything. You gave Lily and me more than I ever dreamed possible. But I can't let you get hurt because of me. I don't belong in your world, and I won't drag you down. Lily and I will be okay. Please don't look for us." Tears fell onto the page, blurring the ink, but she folded the letter and placed it on the kitchen counter. The next morning, as a pale dawn filtered through the curtains, Maya packed a few clothes into an old bag. She lifted Lily, still groggy with sleep, and quietly left the apartment. Snow was falling again, gently covering the sidewalk. But this time there was no Julian to shield them. She clutched her daughter tightly, silent tears rolling down her cheeks, her heart breaking with each step. She knew she was doing the right thing, protecting Julian, protecting Lily, protecting herself from a world that would never accept her. But every step away from that apartment, from him, was another cut into her soul. And she wondered if she would ever stop feeling this pain, or if it would always be the cost of loving a man she could never truly have. The snow had stopped, leaving Boston draped in a shimmering white coat under the pale winter sun. Maya stood in the playground of St. Anne's Orphanage, a few miles outside the city center. She wore an old coat, her brown hair tied back, hands busy handing out cookies to the children darting around her. Their laughter rang out, bright and innocent, easing the ache in her heart. It had been 2 weeks since she left the apartment on Elm Street, leaving Julian only a letter. She had come here, to a place where she could give something back to the world, just as something had once been given to her. Maya had come to the orphanage not only to help, but to hide. Every night, in the small rented room she paid for with what little savings she had left, she wrestled with memories of Julian. His gentle gray eyes, that rare smile, the warmth of his arms in the snow. But she kept telling herself that leaving was the right thing. He deserved a life free of tabloid smears, free of boardroom whispers. As for her and Lily, they would be okay. They always had been. Today she was playing tag with the kids when a figure appeared at the playground gate. She froze, breath catching. Julian. He stood there in his familiar gray coat, but his face was gaunt, his eyes sunken as though he hadn't slept in days. The children glanced at him curiously, whispering to each other, but Maya remained still, heart pounding. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her feet refused to move. Julian stepped into the yard, his eyes never leaving hers. "Maya," he called, his voice hoarse, heavy with desperation and resolve. "I've looked everywhere for you. Sarah said you might be here." She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself like armor. "You shouldn't be here, Julian," she said, voice trembling. "I made it clear in the letter. You need to move on with your life." Julian shook his head and took a step closer. "My life means nothing without you." He stopped just a few feet away, pain etched in his face. "You think you're protecting me, but you're wrong. I don't care about the board, the media, or anyone else. I only care about you and Lily." His words cut through the wall she had built around her heart. She shook her head, tears welling. "You don't understand, Julian. I don't belong in your world. I'll only hurt you, drag you down." "Enough," Julian interrupted, his voice firm but not angry. He dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the playground, in full view of the wide-eyed children. From his coat pocket, he pulled out a small box and opened it, revealing a simple silver ring, unflashy, unpretentious. "Maya, I don't want you to be anyone else. You don't need to belong to my world, because you are my world. Just be you, the woman who gave me $1 when she had nothing, who showed me that kindness is the only thing that truly matters." The kids burst into cheers, a few clapping excitedly, but Maya just stood there, tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked into his eyes, saw nothing but raw, unwavering truth, and for the first time, she didn't see a chasm between them. She saw a man who had chosen her against all odds. She stepped forward, knelt before him, her trembling hand reaching up to touch his face. "Julian," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I'm scared, but I love you." He smiled, radiant, rare, and slid the ring onto her finger. "Then be scared, but stay with me." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as the children cheered behind them. Maya buried her face in his chest, tears soaking into his coat, but this time they were tears of hope. Spring arrived in Boston with soft breezes and gentle golden sunlight, melting the last patches of snow along the sidewalks. The little house on Maple Street, just a few blocks from where Maya once parked her old Honda Civic each night, was now bursting with red and yellow tulips that she and Lily had planted together. The house wasn't big, but it was warm and welcoming, with cream-colored walls, a living room full of children's books, and a kitchen that always smelled like freshly baked cookies. It was the place Maya, Julian, and Lily had turned into their home. A year had passed since Julian's proposal at the orphanage, and Maya had become a woman even she could hardly recognize. Each morning she looked in the mirror and no longer saw the single mother who once shivered in the cold, counting coins to buy her child milk. Instead, she saw a strong woman with a radiant smile and eyes filled with hope. She had found herself again, not just through Julian's love, but through the journey of healing, purpose, and self-discovery. Maya was now the founder and director of Haven of Hope, a nonprofit organization that supports homeless single mothers. The idea had been born during her days volunteering at the orphanage, where she realized the kindness once given to her could be multiplied. With Julian's support, not just financially, but through his management experience and network, Maya had turned the organization into a beacon for dozens of women. She led skill-building classes, provided temporary housing, and connected mothers to job opportunities. Every time she saw a woman holding her child in a new apartment, she remembered that snowy hug from Julian, and her heart overflowed with gratitude. Lily, now 5, had blossomed into a bright, bubbly girl with golden pigtails and eyes that sparkled just like her mother's. She attended a nearby preschool where she proudly told her classmates about Daddy, the name she called Julian with all the love of a child. Julian, once the cold and distant CEO, had become a tender, attentive father, spending hours building block towers or reading adventure bunny stories. He had even learned to tie her hair, albeit clumsily, much to Maya's amusement every time she watched him try. One spring afternoon, the family of 3 sat in their backyard under the shade of a large oak tree. Lily was chasing a butterfly, her laughter ringing like wind chimes through the breeze. Maya and Julian sat together on a wooden bench, fingers interlaced. She rested her head on his shoulder, soaking in his familiar warmth. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" she asked softly. "From $1 to this?" Julian smiled, his gaze tender as it met hers. "No," he admitted, "but I know one thing. That dollar was worth more than anything I've ever owned." He reached into his wallet and pulled out the same crumpled bill, now preserved carefully in a protective sleeve. It sat on his desk at Roth Enterprises, a daily reminder of the moment that changed his life. "You saved me, Maya, not the other way around." Maya shook her head, eyes glistening with tears, but she smiled. "We saved each other, Julian. I used to think kindness was a luxury, something only the fortunate could afford. But you showed me it doesn't take much. Just a sincere heart." They sat in silence, holding that truth between them, until Lily ran over and leapt into Julian's lap. "Daddy, come catch butterflies with me," she squealed, tugging his hand. Julian laughed and stood up, chasing her through the grass, pretending to trip and fall just to make her giggle louder. Maya watched them, her heart brimming with a joy she had once believed impossible. The story of Maya and Julian was a testament to the power of kindness, humble yet sincere, capable of changing a life. Maya, once a homeless mother with her last dollar, had shown Julian that true value wasn't found in wealth or status, but in the ability to give without expecting anything in return. In turn, Julian gave Maya the chance to believe in herself and the world again, proving that kindness is not pity, but a connection between souls. Their journey was more than a love story. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, a single act of compassion, a crumpled dollar, a hug in the snow, can plant the seed of hope. And kindness, when rooted in true love, doesn't just heal, it builds futures. From strangers at a gas station on a freezing night, Maya and Julian had built a home, a family, and a legacy of kindness, reminding us all that sometimes the smallest things hold the greatest power. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe for more true-to-life love stories from Soul Stories. Because sometimes the smallest moment can lead to the greatest love.